Good morning. I am Ellen Haviland Carrier, and you are all looking back at me with your cute little faces, wondering what is she going to tell us today? Well, the first thing I'm going to say is let's have some fun. And let's take a walk down memory lane. And yes, I know that for some of us, memory lane is longer and fuzzier than others. Mine is a few weeks short of 77 years. Think back and see if you can recall. When is the first time you hoped for something? I'm sure for most of us, that was when we were young children, hoping beyond hope that Santa would bring everything on our Christmas wish list. But as we get older, our hopes take on a more serious tone. It begins as a youngster's first days of school, hoping mommy will come back at the end of the day. Then I hope my best friend is in my class. I hope the teacher doesn't give us homework on Halloween. I hope I do well in high school. I hope I finish my college applications on time. Oh, I hope I do well at the job interview. I hope I find my soulmate. Or I hope we qualify for a mortgage. I hope our children succeed. I hope Dad accepts the "we can't drive anymore" conversation. And I hope that we can explain to our children that Grandma won't be getting better. We are all on a journey of hope. My own journey of hope actually began with my mother's journey of hope. When she was pregnant with me, her doctor became increasingly concerned at each monthly checkup because I was not developing as a normal fetus should. I was quite small, and the doctor feared that I would not survive the birth. It was customary in 1947 to sedate moms as they gave birth. But Mom's doctor opted not to do that to increase my chances of survival. So I arrived at 9 a.m. on Sunday, June 15, 1947. I loudly and strongly protested my sudden exit from the only warm place I had known. Oh, Mom was hoping I was okay, and she glanced down at the doctor as he held me, and she noticed a puzzled look on his face, and she was thinking, what's wrong with my baby? But simultaneously, he was thinking, this little girl's okay. I was tiny. I only weighed 5 pounds and a quarter ounce. I've taken care of that. Mom said she had to pin my diapers up over my shoulders. And on the day we went home, she put me in the smallest dress she had. But by the time we were home, my arms had slipped out of the sleeves and the whole dress had turned completely around back to front. My grandma crocheted little tiny booties for me. So I survived and I grew, and just like that, I was 5 years old and off to kindergarten. There were no buses in our neighborhood to take kids to Stafford School. None of our moms drove, so we all walked together as a group, and yes, it was uphill both ways. In all kinds of weather, we thought nothing of it. And as often happened, school began on a Wednesday in 1952, and off we went Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Then came the weekend, and all was well. And then bright and early on Monday morning, there was Mom standing beside my bed, waking me up to go to school. Well, I let her know that would not be necessary because I'd already been to school and I was done. Mom gently informed me that I was not done, and in fact, I had many more days of school ahead of me. So I accepted my fate, and besides, everyone else was going off to school as well. My school years went well until the last day of 5th grade. It was a full day. We didn't have any half days. The back counter in our classroom was filled with bags of chips and boxes of cookies and containers of cupcakes and bottles of soda and juice, treats the likes of which were seldom seen in my girlhood home. And after lunch, we tumbled into the classroom, full of chatter and excitement. Party time was here. But first, the teacher called to me and another girl named Barbara out to the hallway. The classroom went silent. She told both of us we would not be going on to 6th grade. We were to check our lockers and our desks for any personal items, gather them up, and then we were to go home. As luck would have it, Barbara and I lived in the same neighborhood, so we walked home together. We were less upset about repeating 5th grade than the fact that we were missing the party. I spent that summer realizing I was now a member of a new class. I was hoping my new classmates would accept me, and oh, how I hoped that no one would tease me about being a repeater. My hopes were answered as I was welcomed with open arms and made a whole new group of friends. And in that group of friends was a gal named Pat. Pat lived in my neighborhood, and we walked many miles to and from school until our last day of senior high school. And indeed became best friends, and we maintained a close friendship to this day. Pat would have been here today, but she's on a cruise. Remember her name because you're going to hear it again in a life-changing event. Well, all too soon we were off to Bristol Eastern High School, which put me into the same class as our own huggable Cheryl C. I was scared to death. Never before had I found myself so completely on my own. I hoped I could manage being one in a sea of over 900 students. So I got the hang of high school quickly and hoped perhaps that maybe I might find a boyfriend. Well, that never happened. I had 2 dates, if you can call it that. In the fall, the school held the annual Sadie Hawkins dance. Any ladies here remember the Sadie Hawkins dance? All right. Yes. The gals can invite the guys. My dad was beside himself, believing I had committed a major social blunder. Girls don't invite boys to dances, he said. I don't think he ever quite got it. In my freshman year, I went to the dance with Tom for my science class. We may have had science class together, but there was no chemistry there. Tom went on to become one of Bristol's heroes as a firefighter. Sophomore year, I asked Tony. We had a nice friendship, but nothing romantically developed, and with good reason. Because today, Tony is known as Father Anton. I now realize that our unspoken connection was our common faith in God and accepting Jesus as our Lord and Savior. Well, for the next 2 years, I decided it's probably best to tend to my studies and leave the boys alone. And I did well. Actually made the honor roll, which, by the way, used to be printed in the Bristol Press. My best friend, Pat, remember Pat? She was dating a young Marine and wanted me to meet him. The year was 1966. The month was May, and the date was Friday the 13th. So I went to Pat's house after school and met the young Marine. And when Pat had the opportunity, she asked me what I thought of him. My answer had to come from God. I said, well, he's nice. Does he have a friend? Next thing I know, a phone call was made, and I have a date with another young Marine for the next night. Yikes. When I got home, I told my parents of the arrangement for me to meet this young Marine the next night. And unknown to me, my dad held the U.S. Marines in very high regard, so he was very pleased with my news. Of course, Dad wasn't thinking about how Marines love to land on things, especially women. The 4 of us went to Riverside Park, which is now Six Flags, and I hoped the evening would go well. It was an interesting evening. He was not sure he liked me. The 2 follow-up dates that week changed his mind. And so the good news is, I finally met the man who would be my soulmate. The bad news is, exactly 1 week after we met, he was headed to war in Vietnam. There were 3 things I hoped would never happen to him. First is that he would not get hurt. And second, and most obvious, that he would not be killed. But my most earnest hope was that he never, ever become a prisoner of war or missing in action. For a very young, 19-year-old girl, it was a scary time, a very scary time. I have at home a shoebox that holds all 128 letters that he wrote to me while he was in Vietnam, some still gritty with Vietnamese soil. This is letter number 90. Please note, see the scribble on the back? See that, Lisa? Mm-hmm. This letter is dated January 28, 1967. And in part, he wrote to me, "Dear Ellen, how are you, my love? Fine, I hope. Here, everything is as well as expected for the condition I'm in." I missed that. "I have received your letter from the 6th of January. Mind, I was happy to hear from you. I hope that you don't mind my handwriting. I cut my finger and I'm having trouble writing." Yeah. Honey, you don't have to ever worry about anything. I will not get hurt. With you praying for me, how can I get hurt? There is no possibility. Honey, I love you. Don't you ever forget it. Well, I have to leave for now. I love you. Good night, Dima. Well, this scribble on the back, first he tried to erase it. I actually got out a magnifying glass to look and see what it was. It says Red Cross Hospital to Vietnam, and that's a Red Cross. This is my mother's diary from 1967. And on February 1st, she wrote this. Pat, there's Pat. Pat called and said that he had been hurt, but not to tell Ellen tonight. She will tell her tomorrow. Of my 3 hopes, the least serious one was realized. 2 days before he wrote that letter, his unit was on patrol when they came under enemy fire. He was a radio man in a crouching position. His account of the day is as follows. The first round landed behind them. The second and third landed to their right and left respectively, and the fourth landed in front of them. He realized he was hurt due to blood on his left hand and blood dripping in his face from a wound above his right eye. His first thought, "Oh, right, I got a purple heart." In the ensuing chaos, he radioed for medical evacuation, got foreman to the wounded, and calmed down those who were panicking. His captain was very impressed with Guy's response to the situation. He told Guy he was putting his name in for a Bronze Star. Unfortunately, he never received a Bronze Star or heard anything about it. Pat and I were working at Aetna Insurance at this time. And during our lunch, we would go across the street to St. Joseph's Cathedral and pray for our soldiers. And after work, we would catch a city bus to State Street, hop off, scamper up Main Street, where we would get another bus that would take us to Corbin's Corner, because Pat's mom worked at Sears at Corbin's Corner. So we got to Sears and checked in with her mom and went out to the car. How do you tell your best friend that the man she holds most dearly in her heart has been wounded in war? I'm sure Pat was hoping she would find the right words to tell me. She handled the task with grace, care, and compassion. She had my back and my heart. Mom's entry on February 2nd. Oh, oops, wait a minute. We've all heard reference to stories traveling through the grapevine. Grapevines grow with twists and bends, and the stories that pass through them also become twisted and bent. And as the description of these wounds passed through the grapevine, the story twisted to say he had been burned on his face. And during the ride home, my mind was filled with so many thoughts. And once home, I walked in the door to find Mom standing in the kitchen. She had spent the whole day hoping I would not be too upset with the news. We locked eyes. And it was in that moment I fully realized just how much that young man meant to me. It is often said that the only way to love someone is to realize they could be lost. This is Mom's entry for February 2nd. Ellen took her news fairly well. She also received her present from me, and I do believe that helped some. Let's see if I can. This is what he sent me. Yep. Still have it for all these years. On February 3rd, Mom writes again. Ellen got a letter from Mrs. Carrier, that would be Keith's mom. When Ellen opened her letter, she found out that he has shrapnel wounds to his arms and legs, and not burns on his face as we had thought. Post-surgical, he was not able to return to combat. He served the remainder of his tour as a military policeman in Penang. This picture's a little small. I'll share this with people later. This is Dee in the hospital. He's wearing an awful lot of bandages for someone who said he only cut his finger. Yeah. He left Vietnam in 1967, was stationed at Cherry Point, North Carolina. Well, that was too far for me. So he requested a transfer to the subbase in Groton. In those days, the U.S. Marines were the security for all Navy bases. He hoped that would be approved, and it was with one condition. Instead of completing his 4 years of service in September of 1968, he would have to extend his service to December of 1968. And because he was there in November, I got to go to the Marine Corps Ball. So he agreed and reported for duty in Groton. I'll stop here and tell you, I am fiercely, fiercely proud of my husband's service to our country, which he did all 4 years while he was still a Canadian citizen. And I wear his ribbons today to thank him and remember him for what he did. We became engaged in April of 1968, and he was honorably discharged on December 10th, 1968. Finally, I hoped we could begin to plan our wedding. Well, in January 1969, he came to me with tears in his eyes. Uh-oh. He wanted to know if I could please wait 2 years to get married, as he planned to attend Hartford State Technical College. 2 years? Well, that sounded like forever. I'm doing this for us, he reminded me. 1969, and I have to admit that I was a naughty girl because I kind of hoped maybe you might flunk out. That hope was not granted. Well, 2 years flew by, and he graduated in June of 1971 with an associate's degree in data processing, and we were married July 24th, 1971. After a couple of years, we began to plan for a family, and on October of 1975, we were delighted to find out we were expecting. Our joy was short-lived when I miscarried in January of 1976. This scenario was repeated a year later. Consultations with medical folks deemed it necessary to remove my entire reproductive system. Now, it may appear that our hopes to build a family were dashed, but not so. When I left the hospital following the surgery, we had a name and a number to put our names on a list for adoption. We had our initial meeting with the adoption agency late in the afternoon. Now, the workday of a social worker can be quite challenging. We had no idea what kind of day this gentleman had. When we walked in, his hair was all mussed up, his shirt was coming untucked. We each received a soggy, limp handshake. And as I glanced down at his feet, I noticed he was wearing two different shoes, one buckled and one tied. Well, we had a cordial and promising meeting and left with a packet of forms to be filled out. We got into the car and looked at each other and said, oh my. These are the folks who will find a baby for us. Heaven knows what we'll get. But we held on to our hopes and reminded ourselves, do not judge, lest ye also be judged. But make no mistake, every aspect of our lives was being judged. When applying for adoption, we had to sell ourselves to complete strangers. We had to convince these folks that we would be excellent parents raising our child in a loving, caring home. And we did that with the help of friends and family. Thank you, Kathy. 3 years later, yes, it took 3 years, we got a phone call on a Monday. We were parents on Wednesday. It's a boy. Christian Charles Carrier had arrived. We received many cards welcoming our new addition, and the main theme that ran through these cards was, you have a baby boy. He will bring you lots of joy. And my reaction was, okay, when? Because whether by birth or adoption, when a new little life joins the family, there's a period of adjustment. It took a couple of weeks to establish our new routine, and yes, we did feel the joy of having our hopes come to fruition. And 3 years later, we rented a limousine. Now, I couldn't get used to that airplane. That took us to JFK Airport, where we welcomed our second son, David Lee Carrier, from South Korea. Our family was complete. Our hopes were granted. The years flew by, and in September of 2013, he was experiencing some medical issues. An exam discovered precancerous polyps in his bladder. Over the next 6 years, he would undergo procedures to remove the polyps because they kept growing back. Then a small tumor developed and was removed. Doctors prescribed chemotherapy, which was administered during the summer of 2018. On the first day of chemotherapy, he was given a gift bag. And in that bag was a deck of playing cards, a pad, a pen, and this little guy. He is an authentic Boys Bear, made especially for the American Cancer Society's Daffodil Days program. His name is Ray O'Connor. Well, I grasped onto Ray as I held on to the hope that the chemotherapy would be successful. And in a way it did, as it gave Dee and I another year and 3.5 months together. Today, Ray lives on Well, in 2016, Dee and I found ourselves in need of a new place to worship. We hoped and prayed God would lead us to that place, and He did. He took us by the hands and said, "Come, my children, come right here." Right here. Not only did we find a welcoming, loving Christian community, but we actually found a family member sitting on a branch of the Carrier family tree, swinging their feet and smiling and waving to us. We are delighted to have Nadine as part of our family. God knows what and whom we need. So I had hoped to be accepted into a new class, and I was welcomed with open arms. I hoped to find my soulmate, and he stands beside me in spirit and plays with the lights in my house, just as he promised. I hoped he would not be wounded in war, but he was. I hoped he would not be killed, taken prisoner, or go missing in action. He did not. I hoped he would flunk out of college. He did not. I hoped to get married. We did. I hoped to raise my biological children. I did not. I still hope to be a mom. And God sent us 2 beautiful baby boys. And very soon, come October, I will also have a daughter. These were the hopes of my past. Now I hold on to new hopes for the future. I hope God keeps me in good health. And I hope Christian and Michelle have a beautiful wedding day of their dreams. And may they know that God will be beside them as they navigate the ups and downs of married life. And I hope my son David is successful in his entrepreneurial endeavors. You people should see the view from up here. This is the best seat in the house. From this vantage point, from Cindy to Donna, from Kristen to Linda and Brian, from Lisa and Doug to Christian and Michelle, and the 3 folks in the balcony, I see gathered here a group of the most loving, caring, generous people ever gathered in one place. It is my hope, and I know it's your hope too, that this awesome group will continue to grow and extend its reach into our community, sharing the good news of Jesus' love. If you are feeling that the hopes you hold in your heart are not coming your way,